That first period was that Jupiterian period that corresponded to the Greek period in the macrocosm. It was very much Guru and his direct disciples. And just like the Greek was, Socrates, almost practically Brahma realized. Maybe he was. And so much knowledge was given. Prabhupada's critique in the dialectical spiritualism of Socrates was entirely favorable. I didn't find anything that was unfavorable. When he critiqued Kierkegaard, he was mostly favorable, but at one point he became unfavorable. But when he critiqued Socrates, I found nothing unfavorable. So this Greek correspondence was there. In other words, they were listening, they were hearing, they were relating. They were then told you need to do some worship, which was hard for some of them, but they did finally start to do it. It was that Greek dasha. What did that get turned into? Then we went into the Roman dasha. The Roman dasha was the militaristic spirit. Still bona fide at this stage, though. This is the thing, see? Although some unbona fide elements are in the consciousness, they aren't really manifesting in the actions so much. The first part of that Roman correspondence was the heavy energy of confrontation, the heavy energy of go out there and conquer, and get the Lakshmi, bring the Lakshmi home to the temple, do the books and make these Vikarmis pay for these books. Preach very strongly, a very Mars energy. Mars on the highest octave, meaning the spiritual octave, is Nrisinghadeva. So there was heavy energy on pushing hard, confronting, being protected, which Nrisinghadeva energy through Mars, but really straight Nrisinghadeva energy. I'm saying that it's the Mars dasha when you walk it back. Now, that Mars dasha, when the deviation started really entering, which as I say was in the early 70s to mid 70s, then it started to lower from the Nrisinghadeva octave down to the Mars. Because remember with the Mars, there's higher Mars and lower Mars. So at first it went to, say, higher Mars. Then, like the period of the deprogrammers in 76, there was a lot of martial energy during that. But things started to get fanatical then. It was like, if you don't agree with me, then you must be with the deprogrammers. It was the whole energy, it's us versus them. The deprogrammers are on us, and I'm the this, I'm the that, and I say this, and there better not be any disagreement. The energy was that, then you're a demon just like them. The Mars energy was present, but it went to a lower octave because the deviations of personal ambition, the poison is personal ambition, and that poison had entered. That poison had entered. And what was the great sinister movement where it entered in 1970? We know what the great sinister movement was. We know very clearly what it was. But I'm talking now in terms of dashas. It was the martial Mars dasha. And it had now degraded down from where it was. When it was predominantly Nrisinghadeva confrontational. And remember, the Roman Empire was very different from the Greek. The Roman Empire really expanded and did a Pax Romana and really had a huge territory and held it for some time with a very strong emperor. So the Krishna consciousness movement during this period of time in the early 70s, particularly around late 71, 72, 72 going into 73, this is when there was quite an expansion. And still the purity was there. But then the Nrisinghadeva energy started to degrade into the Mars energy. Started to become materialistic due to the personal ambition of the leaders, not due to the rank and file, the real workers, but due to the leaders, the misleaders. But they weren't misleading in a big way at this time, but they were starting, and everything has to start. So then it got worse and worse with this Mars energy. This Mars dasha continued right through Prabhupada leaving. It was still the Mars dasha. It had not gone to the next dasha yet. This Mars dasha culminated in the murder of Sulochana, which was extremely violent. It was a political assassination. It was a hit, and it shocked the devotee world. At that point, it was too much for the mass to take. It forced them to have to question things at a very deep root, and they did not like the questions, and they particularly did not like the answers that those honest questions evoked. Therefore, the thing had to change. And it changed dashas, not immediately after that, but very soon after that, it changed into the next dasha, which corresponding the macro Western dashas, we go Jupiter, Mars, Moon. It went into a lunar dasha. Lunar dasha is a dreamy dasha. It's a dasha of a lot of imagination. It's a dasha of more feminine. The Mars is ultra-masculine. It's a dasha of more communication because Moon is mind, and mind wants to communicate with other minds. We had the lunar dasha, as it kept manifesting, there'd be more and more information coming out, more and more mental speculation. The Ritvic mental speculation came in during this dasha. The internet exploded during this dasha, and the World Wide Web, which is, although a lot of Mercury energy in the World Wide Web, obviously, there's a lunar element that encouraged its growth. A lot of mental speculation, a lot of subconscious feelings. A lot of devotees got into trying to figure out what their subconscious feelings were, how they were actually manipulated on our subconscious plane. It was a dasha that pulled back from the Mars confrontational and went into this lunar energy. And the lunar dasha went on for a significant period of time from the mid to late 80s after the assassination of Sulochan until the dasha that we entered into now, which corresponds to the Dark Ages. The lunar dasha is over. We're not in that one anymore. We're in the Saturn dasha now, the corresponding dasha to the big. Tribalism is starting to take place amongst devotees. It has to. The devotees are starting to break up into their own tribes because they can't relate with others, because there's just too much deviation over in this group. There's too much deviation in this group. We got to form this group. It's a natural correspondence. In the feudal times, in the Dark Ages, these were feudal kingdoms. They were like tribes all over Europe, etc. We're talking the West now. Of course, there was some of that corresponding even in India, but we're not going to get into that. We're not going to go into Indian history. We're going to stay with Western history. But right now, the corresponding of this covering, this is the covering energy I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the real Krishna consciousness movement. I'm talking about the covering energy, potency, going through the dashas of the covering. We are now in the Saturn period. And things during the Dark Ages were quite corrupt. For example, the kings did not go to the priests in their kingdom for spiritual advice. The priests were owned by the kings. The king would say, like, well, I've decided that the church will function in this way because, after all, I own the church. The priests, which were the perverted reflections of the Brahmins, they were there to present a type of kaitava dharma, chala dharma, just for the purpose of dharma, artha, kama. To keep the artha, the economic situation of the kingdom, functioning. You supposedly were with God, but really the king decided how things were going to go with the church. And if he said that a certain marriage was going to take place, then that bishop better agree. So the Dark Ages were controlled by these little fiefdoms, these kingdoms. And right now, things have broken up into kingdoms to a significant degree. And we're in a Saturn period, and there's a lot of corruption. And it's going to get worse. It's very bad now, but it's not bad enough that everybody's waking up. But it is going to hit a nadir. This corruption of the dashas, of the Saturn dasha, is going to hit a nadir where the corruption is so blatant and egregious